Today on a very special episode of Technado, we have a couple of great interviews, including one about mobile device management. Also got a lot of articles about Red Hat, Microsoft, and some other news. And we'll be popping this book to celebrate an anniversary. That's all coming up on Technado, starting right now. Hello and welcome to Technado. I'm your host, Peter Van Rysdam, and I am joined as always by Don Pizzette and Justin Dennison. And guys, we have a big one today. For those watching on video, we've got some accoutrement here for a very fancy 100th anniversary party. Congratulations!
Yeah. Is accoutrement? I'm really stuck on the accoutrement.
Really trying to class us up here.
Yeah.
Well, it's purely classy. We've got the emoji party hats. We've got the little the blowers here. Don't actually make any noise. I was hoping they would for the audio.
What kind of budget does this podcast have? Our blowers don't even
shoot. I'm going
for our audio.
I am going back to the dollar store. And we also have some.
Justin's breaking his hat.
It's not made for Justin's size hands.
Nope.
That's fantastic. Justin has broken the elastic on his hat. Yep. We also have some stuff for mimosas here with fine plasticware. let me for the audio here.
Only the best. Yep. Only the best for Technado.
Let's pop one of these open while we get started here. And guys, I was out at FCA this week. FCA Cyber up in Baltimore. Talking about all the great military contractors and things for our armed forces. But you guys had some cool interviews as well that we're going to get to.
Yep, so that'll be a lot of fun. It's just Justin and I winging it, trying to find some way to make it by without your IT background and leadership.
Yeah, who asked all the technical questions?
There was large amounts of silence, I'll tell you.
Yeah, we let them ask us questions. They kept asking, like, are you guys going to say something? Yeah. And we would just sit there.
And where's Peter?
Yeah, I was told that Peter. Well, look at this plastic cork. Okay, well, I want to get this audio.
These are.
It's just going to be a screw off, isn't it?
Yep.
Shoot! All right. Man, I put back the Andres Extra Dry, thinking these little bottles would be cute. Then we could each pop one, and they're little.
They do have a screw cap.
I don't know, Brad, if you have a Brad is our producer back there, and thank you, Brad, too, for 100 episodes as well. Yeah. If you have a cork noise you can put in post, I will go ahead and pop it right now. All right, so if you heard something there, that's thanks to Brad.
And if this seems like poor planning to you, well, you're absolutely right. I don't think if you asked anybody, they would have said, "Oh yeah, Technado, that'll go 100 episodes." But here we are, which is really just a testament to our lack of listening to feedback. So,
do you guys want some orange juice?
Sure.
And here's the mimosa. It's early when we're filming this. Pulp? We have some pulp or no pulp?
No pulp.
No pulp.
Yeah, let's go no pulp.
Yeah, right. I mean, we're on camera. Knowing our luck, it'll just
pulp everywhere.
Yeah, in the teeth.
All right. Well, we are actually going to do content today.
Yeah, we're going to do that.
So we have quite the news list that's going. So while you're pouring mimosas, let me kind of set the stage here.
Yeah, do that.
There's a ton of events going on. So we got news coming out of Microsoft, out of Red Hat, and so on. But I want to start us with politics, which we normally try not to get into, but something really interesting happened this week. President Trump issued an executive order. I've got the CNN business headline here. U.S. bans Huawei from selling telecom gear and threatens its supply chain. So we've heard rumblings since the end of last year where they were saying that the Chinese government is too involved with the operation of Huawei, and so the U.S. government has been slowly banning their hardware in use in the U.S. government, and they've been pressuring other countries to do the same. Well, now President Trump has made it an executive order, so now it's not an option. We're not allowed to buy Huawei networking gear in the U.S. anymore.
Was this not essentially already kind of in place? Like, hadn't the DoD kind of done their own things?
For government agencies.
Okay, but this is just now across the board.
Everybody. Okay. So, I can't go and legally buy a Huawei router right now. No, not that I would do that anyway, but
Wow.
you know, I couldn't, and not because I think the Chinese government is in there, because they're going to be in there anyway, but just because the routers aren't very good.
Well, it's funny at the FCA show they were talking about there was a lot of hardware providers talking about setting up networks and things for in the field and for mission support, and all of them were touting made in America, or made in Canada or things like that were basically just saying not China because. Obviously none of the generals walking around were going to buy those things coming from places like this. So.
Yeah, I think as a society, we've just come to the point where we know when we buy hardware, we're effectively selecting who we allow to spy on us. And so, if you're, well, I guess at FCA, it's the U.S. government anyway, so they're just saying our own agencies will have access, and that's fine.
Yeah, they're spying on us. One funny story from that. So you scan badges. And one guy comes around and he talked to us for a little bit. Said, "Oh, can I scan your badge? We can send you some information afterwards." And he said, "You can try." And I looked down and he's sharpied over the barcode, the QR code. I'm like, "Great." He's like, "We're NSA. We can't. We're not allowed to be." I'm like, "Yes, you are. You still get email."
You just told me.
Yeah.
Like, that's
Like, and then
is it a secret if I know?
Then he proceeds to take two popcorns.
Two popcorns?
Two popcorns.
I mean,
See?
you can't even call him by name.
No. Jerk. But if I did, it would be Edward Snowden. Does anyone have that in their buzzword bingo today?
You.
You guys did?
I
I
do.
Bring up my
I do.
buzzword. Yeah, so
I'm going to catch up
I do have Snowden. Good.
when we get. Oh, you did? I didn't even put that. So
Hey, yeah,
you're
you
welcome,
got to keep.
guys.
You weren't here in the interviews, so I guess Justin, we have to make the decision. Like, do we want to allow him to get credit for?
Well, I'm going to sit here as we hear the interviews, and I'll be able to catch up at that time.
Well,
won't
that's
I?
true. Let's try and get bingo before the interviews. That way, it doesn't matter.
There you go. 'Cause you guys did it in different order than me. Hey, by the way, our mimosas are here ready. So if we want to,
I didn't even see our server.
I don't know if Brad can also give us a ding of the glasses. But
The fake.
ding.
Cheers. If we pour this on a
Yeah.
laptop, that'll be perfect.
That's going to happen. Well, that is delicious.
That is top quality.
That is.
Never had a mimosa before, and I'll say that.
It's probably
First
your
and
last
last.
Yeah, not exactly pleasant.
Congratulations.
one. It kind of tastes like, for some reason,
Don is
it's
so
a
basic.
grapefruit. I know it's orange juice, but
Yeah,
like
well,
the,
it's
the
the
medley of
Prosecco.
flavors.
Yeah.
I like my mimosa. Hold the orange juice, hold the champagne, extra scotch.
Extra
Yeah.
scotch.
Yeah, that's
That is an interesting recipe.
hey, it's just a family recipe handed down.
Well, let's get back to the news here. On CircleID.com, our next article, close to 735,000 fraudulently obtained IP addresses have been uncovered and revoked, RN reveals. So the American Registry for Internet Numbers. So they handle the assignment of IP addresses? Because like DNS will do the URLs, but is that how you
they
assign the IP?
actually do the registration of internet numbers in America, and that's what they do. It's kind of in their name.
Hey, wait, did you have mimosas prior to this? Or?
Was that why Russia has their own internet now?
That's right. That's right. They got to have their own. No, we did last year. It was a big deal. It was all over the tech media. I'm sure everybody heard about it. That we ran out of IP addresses. IPv4 is dead. We aren't really out of addresses, but the IPv4 address space, the public address space, is issued out by a number of people. Aaron is the one that's responsible for North America, and they were the first to run out of addresses. So in IPv4, the smallest address space they would issue out traditionally was a /24. They ran out of them. They're out. They were out then. They're out today. Well, a /24 contains 254 usable IPs or something like that. They discovered an organization that was basically creating shell companies and securing these /24 networks, and had basically secured 735,000 public IP addresses, and they were selling them. Turning around and selling them at a profit, and they transfer them over to a third party. So they figured it out. There were 19 shell companies involved. They put in a court order. Originally, they were just going to revoke the addresses, and the fraudulent company actually sued Aaron. So Aaron had to go to court and say, like, well, here's what's going on. This is not legal. The court agreed, and so now they have seized the 735,000 addresses, as well as assigned some financial penalties. I forget how much, but
I think it was 350,000. They had to pay their legal fees.
Oh yeah,
for
lawyers.
Aaron. But the market value was like $9 to $14 million, which is
Absolutely.
crazy.
Yep. I I was just filling out IP paperwork because we're working on getting our own independently owned IP block, and that's a struggle now because you have to like justify the need and show that you're BGP multi-homed and all this other stuff in order to get them. So they're really strict about it. These guys were just selling them for money, and they got busted. So it makes you wonder how many other organizations are doing the same thing.
It was an odd thing because they went, restraining order. Like Aaron was like, yeah, we're going to take these back. I was kind of surprised that they kind of had the gall.
Yeah,
like,
ballsy.
We're like, well, I know we took them in a fraudulent manner, but you can't come near
just
us.
play devil's advocate on that. Why is it fraudulent? I mean, I know you can resell domain names and things like that. I can go and buy 100 domain names and resell those.
Yeah. So it's because of the shortage. So, they knew we were going to run out of IPv4 addresses, so they put rules in place that said, for now on, if you request anything bigger than a /29, and a /29 is like 4 addresses. Is it 4?
Yeah, that's
8?
right.
4 or 8? I don't know. Anyhow.
You got 3 bits, you got 8.
We don't subnet on mimosas.
Yeah, I don't know.
But
That's weird.
so anyway, if you request a block any larger than that, you have to do a justification. You have to show that you're going to use those addresses. Well, they're not using any of them.
Gotcha.
So they just snatched up 730,000 addresses, and they're holding them to sell to other people. So they will get used eventually.
Yeah, they're using them for profit.
Yeah,
And I guess the real fraudulent behavior became because it was the same people. They were just going, oh, this is a different company.
They had
and
to
they
create
also
the shell companies.
They also falsified like statements and like official like verifications and things. So there was also falsification of paperwork involved with this. So
Stupid capitalism.
yeah, I know,
Yeah.
crazy.
All right,
times.
we're going to switch over to we're talking about Adobe now on AppleInsider.com. Adobe warning of legal problems if subscribers keep using old versions of Creative Cloud apps. Is this going to affect my use of Fireworks?
It might potentially.
Oh, no.
So Adobe sent out around emails, and I actually got one of these emails because I have an Adobe account. And when I read the email before all the news broke on this, I was really confused because it says in there that they're revoking access to some older versions of tools, and the email specifically mentioned Photoshop. So I think it was like Photoshop version 18. Now, I don't really use Photoshop, so I didn't care. But there was a clause in there that was really interesting to me. It said if you continue to use the old version of Photoshop, if you don't update to the new one, then you are susceptible to being sued for rights infringement by a third party. Now, the interesting thing here was it didn't name the third party, which I thought was really weird. And then it was saying that I could get sued for using Adobe's software by somebody else. Like, that seems like a transference of liability, which sounds like the BS they sneak into end-user license agreements that the courts never uphold. So the whole thing just sounded like BS. I actually thought it was a phishing email at first. And, so I had to check the email source. But since then, more details have come out, and it turns out that Adobe has been doing some pretty shady things on the back end. And they had licensed some of the audio technology from Dolby, and it was built into a number of their products.
They got Premiere Pro, Lightroom, Classic have all been listed in this.
Yeah, and it's weird because the email I got called out Photoshop. Is there audio stuff in Photoshop?
There's some. I know you can do some animations. And
It gets weird with the Adobe products now. Like Photoshop can make videos.
yeah, I
and
mean, I
actually
know that's what I
split
use
videos apart.
for animated GIFs and stuff. It would be Photoshop. So.
Well, they had licensed some stuff with Dolby, and the way the deal worked was that Adobe was supposed to give them usage reports every quarter or something like that to say, here's how many of our users are using this, and we pay you a license fee based on it. Well, Adobe wasn't turning over the reports. And so Dolby finally stepped in and said, look, we need you to give us those reports. It's how the contract works. And Adobe refused. And so Dolby is taking Adobe to court. And Adobe is now trying to pass that off. Like, we're going to yank away this licensed technology from all of our users and try and defray that liability. It's really interesting because Adobe is a subscription-based service now. Like, they want to know usage, how many of us are using their software. So they are really strict about it there, but then they're not doing it with their own partners. So this is a big Adobe screw-up. I'm curious to see how it ends up.
And I don't understand how this plays out. So Creative Cloud, I have a Creative Cloud
Thank you for
account.
saying cloud.
Yeah.
I've been waiting for someone else to say it because I said it in the title.
Yeah. So,
All right.
I don't
Oh, by the way,
say-
if you're not playing Buzzword Bingo with us, head over to go.otpro.tv/buzzword-bingo. Download and fill out your card and play along. Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. When I had active installations, I didn't use many of the products, but it was kind of a bundled thing. It said, hey, there's a new version. There's a new version. So I was kind of confused, but then I started reading the email, or reading down through the article, and saw that this has to do with some crazy shenanigans. But then it caught my eye. There's a tweet embedded where someone goes, time to cancel my subscription. And then I remembered I've tried to cancel my subscription twice. And if you don't cancel it the month that it lapses, then you get tied in for another year, and you have to pay like this crazy astronomical early cancellation fee.
Yep.
So I have a Creative Cloud
and you will forever.
For like the last 4 years that I haven't used. Just because it's actually, I forget, and it's cost prohibitive for me to get rid of.
Yeah, and their monthly subscription is an annual subscription. You just pay monthly.
Yeah.
So, there is no, I just need it for a month. They don't do that.
0% interest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's Adobe is a interesting company.
A little
So
sketchy there. All right, let's head over to ZDNet now. Mozilla offers research grant for a way to embed Tor inside Firefox. So this was something we talked about last week, right? About how Tor wasn't going to work anymore with some changes to Firefox and plugins.
so Firefox. The Tor browser is based on Firefox,
Right.
and so when Firefox had their weird extension bug, that passed on over to the Tor browser too, right? They had a certificate expire, and so all the extensions disabled. So this is really kind of separate from that. Mozilla is just saying, look, instead of having to run a separate Tor browser, why not just have it where, like when you open up an incognito or a private browsing tab, why not have it where you can open up a Tor tab? And go that way. So they've created a research grant for that. They're trying to fund somebody to create that. And the timing of it couldn't be better because the CIA this week, if we jump to the next article, this one's over on Wired, the CIA sets up shop on Tor, the anonymous internet. So the CIA now actually has a web page on Tor. The Tor link or the Onion link is somewhere in here, right here. And I expected to see just a fully randomized link, but they actually took the time to generate the first characters of the hash, so it actually says CIA.gov.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, that's a 9-character string. It takes a good bit of CPU to generate a 9-character string.
If anyone has a good bit of CPU.
They put some effort into this one. Yeah, they're probably using ours.
That's what's actually getting embedded in the Tor tab is just the ability to do that.
So if you ever want to go to the CIA website and feel like doing it on the Tor network, I guess you can. There you go.
Now, if I go there, are there any cookies or anything there on the? Can they track me across the rest of the?
Okay, so Peter's like, I'm a little iffy about this. Like I thought the purpose was to not know what I was doing. Is this something that could be an ulterior motive?
I think it's designed for whistleblowers.
Okay.
So like if you are in North Korea and you want to report on the horrible living conditions or something like that, you could go to this CIA page. That would be my assumption. There have been rumors for years that if you go to like the FBI's website that it puts a tracker on your machine. Most of that's just BS. I had to say most because maybe they're more advanced than what we can see. But if you ever take a look at the traffic that passes between you and their servers, there's not anything there beyond a regular website. And that's because the people that go to the websites aren't normally the criminals. There's not a whole lot of like mafia leaders saying, let me go check out the CIA website. So it's I have to assume it's mostly for whistleblowers.
No, I missed it. Did you say dark web in that?
I did not, but thanks.
Did Don though? I know I'm giving it to you here. Wait, you already have it circled. Oh, is that from last week?
Yeah, I'm reusing my card because I care about the planet.
I see. Good for you.
I was too lazy to print another card.
Printed in color.
But I will say I'm kind of interested to see that browser tab come in there because just so we're clear, that actual private browsing session. Not real private.
Yeah.
Just don't think you're getting away with anything.
Incognito hides it from your wife.
or
This
people you love in general.
This new super private browsing that they're trying to create would actually be private.
Yeah.
So nobody said that word.
No, but you did.
Yeah,
And
no,
thank
I hear
you.
that. I'm already losing. At a big disadvantage today. All right, let's head over to the PE Hub, which I assume is where PE teachers go to talk shop and all about.
I've wondered about that, like physical education and private equity. Like those two don't seem related in any way.
Yeah,
So,
you don't.
there's gonna be some confusing conventions out there.
There's not a lot of equity in.
You become a PE teacher if you're failed private equity company?
Sure.
Is that how it works?
There is sweat equity, right?
Sure, that's true.
You know, so maybe that's the crossover.
They give you those coach's shorts on your way out. I'm sorry.
And a whistle.
You didn't make it. All right. Well, it's a short and sweet headline here, but VMware is buying BitNami. So VMware says May 15th it was buying BitNami for no, that can't be right. No.
1.17 million. Oh no, that was a raise
That was a
BitNami
funding.
did
Okay.
back in
I
2014.
was going to say that's pretty cheap.
Yeah. I was surprised to see this because it didn't really line up in my head. Justin, you ever use BitNami?
Yeah, I've used BitNami images from like the marketplace and some Docker images. It didn't make sense to me. I tried to read through it, it just didn't.
I get my mimosa there in front of.
Yeah, I had trouble with this as well.
So if I want to experiment with a product, or just learn about something new, or just like run a security test against it, or something like that, it can take a while. If I want to stand up a Drupal server, it's kind of a pain in the butt, or WordPress, or whatever.
Kinda.
But yeah, but you can go to AWS, or you can go to Azure, or you can go to Google Compute, and BitNami has tons of marketplace images, many of which are free, that you can just click a button and it deploys, and it drops a server with a standard configuration that's running that software package, and so you have a WordPress site up and running in seconds. Now, I'm untrustworthy enough. Well, no, I guess I'm trustworthy.
Untrusting?
I don't know. I don't
I
trust
have
pre-built images.
I have reservations about this.
Yeah.
I'll use it to test, but then I go, I don't know what's going on around here.
So I have never used a BitNami image in production, but I've used the hell out of them in testing and experimenting, labs, in our training courses, and so it's always worked out really well, and it's always been tied to these cloud providers. So if the announcement was Amazon buys BitNami or Microsoft buys BitNami, that would make sense to me, but VMware did. And so I guess they're going to start focusing on, let's make it where we can deploy locally. Or maybe BitNami already has VMware images and I just don't know about it. But it seems odd. But in the future, it sounds like you're going to be able to quickly and easily deploy software packages on top of VMware's vSphere, thanks to their acquisition of BitNami.
Does this have any way, is this connected in any way by Dell owning a large portion of VMware? Like, is that are they providing hardware and say, vSphere has all these it's like cloud, and you just go click.
It could, but I would say you kind of already got some of this functionality, like it was cPanel, which if you've ever supported web servers, you know cPanel's the devil, but a lot of people really like it because you can say, all right, I got a web server and I want WordPress, I click this WordPress button, and now it deploys it, right? So there's other ways to do this without acquiring somebody.
It deploys a broken one.
Yeah,
let's just be
so
honest.
I have to imagine this is more of a move for just having those images to be able to rapidly deploy. I don't know, maybe VMware is going to take another stab at launching their own cloud provider again. It didn't work last time, but second time's a charm.
Speaking of images, can you scroll down on this article here,
Sure.
Don? I'm curious. The next suggested 8 articles for me all have the same exact image.
Oh,
6 of his.
6 of my 8 do. Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of images, they should get a little stock photography license there.
Well, I don't think
It's-
PE Hub
yeah,
is necessarily the
it's
biggest news
XPE
outlet out there.
teachers. Come on,
Yeah.
man.
PE Hub hasn't been funded yet.
Yeah.
When I find articles like these, I try and be honest about the source. Like I could probably find a bigger news outlet that had this one. I did find other sources, but in this case, PE Hub gets a little
I'm
press.
sure they broke it. All right. Back to ZDNet, though. Red Hat Universal Base Image. RHEL?
Rel.
RHEL? RHEL. I was just saying it really slow. RHEL containers for everyone. With Red Hat Universal Base Image, you can build and share containerized RHEL applications with your friends and customers. What are you checking off there, Don?
Containers.
Oh, good. Thank you for saying it out loud back to me.
I don't have it.
Sucker.
Man, you got me. So Red Hat Summit just wrapped up. If you went, I'm jealous I didn't get to go this year, but a lot of announcements came out, most of it centering around Red Hat Enterprise Linux version 8 coming out. We talked about that last week, but some other announcements have come out. One of them is that there is now a Red Hat Universal Base Image available for use in Docker and other container-based type environments. They had some images available before, but they required a license, right? So it wasn't like something you could just quickly deploy arbitrarily. Now they've created this one that doesn't require a license. It's actually free. You can deploy a Red Hat container now using their new Universal Base Image. The thing is, there is still kind of a cost when it comes to support. So if you're using that Red Hat Universal Image on Windows or any other Linux distro, you get no support, but you get access to the image. If you're running it on top of a RHEL server, then you get support through the base license of that server. So if you want support, you'll need to make sure it's deployed on top of an actual licensed RHEL server. But for everybody else, you can make use of it, and that is great for developers who want to maybe run Ubuntu on their laptop, but then have containers that are running that RHEL universal image they can then deploy in their the RHEL environment.
And some previous work that I did, we were developing applications for consumers, and they used RHEL. We didn't have access to RHEL. We didn't want to pay for the license just for the dev environment.
Taiwan.
So yeah. So yeah. Well, I wasn't running the show, Don. I wasn't running the show. So we would try to cobble something together, maybe using CentOS or something like that.
Close enough.
Close enough. But I was wondering how the service contract worked. But we talked about BitNami in the last article. It actually says they're going to prepackage certain programming languages and runtimes with variants of it. Like, I need a RHEL server running Node.js so I can build Node.js applications. That's going to be some of the variants of these. So I might have to give that a try.
Yeah, it'll be really nice. It's just kind of extending that functionality, making these containers easier to work with, and helping people start to get into that Red Hat ecosystem. Yeah,
I prefer RHEL, by the way.
Yeah, I'm sure their marketing team would too.
I go with that. All right, we're sticking with Red Hat, but heading over to the Red Hat website, or redhat.com, announcing the next evolution of our Red Fedora Mark. So what are we talking about here, Don?
All right, so Red Hat is the most successful commercial Linux vendor, right? And they have been for a long, long time. And their logo of a red fedora has kind of defined the company all these years. And when I heard that they were going to be announcing at Red Hat Summit that they were changing their logo, that's a big deal. Like, when companies change their logo, I mean, just look at Slack, right, where we had the swastika of penises, right?
Yeah.
So, that's the
And
kind
that's
of
a
stuff
quote.
that happens.
You're quoting there.
I'm quoting, actual news source there. So when I heard Red Hat was doing it, I thought we were in real trouble. Turns out it's actually a pretty benign thing. They kind of have two logos, right? So one logo is just the red fedora, but it comes from their original logo, which is actually on the boxes in the background behind me. It was called the Shadow Man.
Oh, the guy with the hat on.
Yeah, it was a shadowy silhouette of a guy wearing the red fedora. And they did some focus groups, and they found where most people thought that looked creepy and spooky and like a hacker. And so most people didn't have a positive emotion as a result of that. So what they've done is they have assassinated the Shadow Man, and now we just have the hat. So you still have a hat.
I read that and I was like, what?
Yeah.
I've never, ever, ever felt that way.
I don't know who they interviewed, like people off the street, I guess.
Yeah. What does this make you think of? Sneaky, shadowy, spy versus spy. For some reason, that's what I think of as spy versus
Did
spy.
it have a long pointy nose?
Good stuff. Yeah. And not to get into politics, but it could be argued that the red hat has been ruined for some by, red hats.
I thought you were going with communism, but I see what you're going now.
Yeah, the hats that some people wear.
We're onto your tricks, Peter. We know you're trying to milk us into saying the former Soviet Union's name.
No, I'm saying no. I'm talking
No, he's
about
talking about
the MAGA hats.
Yeah, the MAGA hats.
Red hats, because those people are
them.
often referred to as red hats.
Oh, that would be super confusing.
Yeah, that would be a negative connotation, though. Like as far as marketing is concerned.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, it's not ideal. Whichever side you're on, it's still.
Yeah, this is so separated, though. Like
it is.
It's a
But
heavy
this is a fedora now.
tech topic. I don't know. See, this is what's wrong with marketing.
By the way, I found that when you're talking, Don, and I think I can reach for more champagne, I can't.
No,
I'm still in Don's
you're
shot
still in frame.
when I reach into the old bucket there and pull out another bottle. But oh well.
We're turning into a cheap champagne commercial.
Yeah. Prosecco.
No, you had the logo turned the other way.
Yeah. Marca Prosecco sparkling wine, product of Italy.
It's a fine vintage. 2019 was a good year, as I remember.
Last week was a great week. All right, we're going to go to Tom's Hardware now. Hands-on with Lenovo's first foldable screen laptop. We've been seeing a lot of these recently with the phones that kind of turn into the phablets or tablets or whatever you want to call them. but I'm looking at this picture here, and I'm hoping it's a glare.
It's not.
That's a break in the screen there.
No, that's just where the fold is. These companies are trying really hard to convince us that we want this.
I don't want this, because that's where the backing, right? There's nothing behind that, so you get semi-transparency and you see light coming through is what it looks like to me.
Let's pretend for a moment, right, that it is the most vibrant and beautiful screen possible. And let's pretend for a moment that hinge is like T2000, liquid metal, reforms, seamless, right? Let's just pretend that all that is perfect. Let me tell you why this still sucks. Where's the keyboard? Right?
Yeah.
So you can open this up, and it's nice and wide, and you got a big screen, like a monitor, like you already have pretty much everywhere. And then if you fold it clamshell style, it becomes a laptop with a touch keyboard. And you find me a person that thinks a touch keyboard is better than a physical keyboard, and
I find you a liar.
yeah,
I don't even like a lot of physical keyboards. I'm like, these are bad keyboards.
Yeah. And so if you keep going somewhere in here, they actually show it. Like here, it's folded like a laptop, and you can't really see any keys whatsoever. They've glared.
Well, keep scrolling down
to the external keyboard.
Yeah,
here. And just bring this keyboard along with you. It's so great.
Man, oh man.
So, yeah.
I don't really understand the infatuation with like foldable screens. I just don't understand it.
The only thing, I can see more of a use case for a phone you can fit in your pocket than that can become a tablet for viewing, video or things like that, because that's not as much about productivity. But on something like this, where you're building it as a computer, you're going to want to type.
So this is I actually worked on research in grad school for organic light-emitting devices on plastic, so they could be folded and manufactured easily. This was the last application that I would think of for them, right? Photovoltaic cells that attach to your windows that you can print really easily. New electrochromic devices. Those are color change based on voltages. There's a bunch of other things that I would use flexible, like emitting devices for.
Because they had the roll-up TVs at CES that roll down into your furniture.
Or you could get a projector.
Sure.
And then when the screen goes bad, you still have a projector.
That's fair.
Yeah, or they were talking about doing advertisements on a Pepsi can, where you pick up the can and you got a full motion ad. Like that kind of stuff is not folding; it's just bent, and they don't even have that working quite right yet. So it's just I don't know. Maybe we'll see this make it someday.
We're going to look like the idiots that were like an iPad. Whoever wants a big old phone, and and soon where it's going to be like, well, you just think it and it shows up on the screen. So I don't know. We'll see if I think these will do better in the phone kind of space, but I don't know. This is not the last one we're going to see for sure.
Yeah, everything's going to be folding soon. I'm just I'm waiting for my folding desk, and
sure, why not?
It'll be great. Folding car.
All right. Folding car. Sure.
It takes up half the space.
All right. Staying on, or going back to ZDNet again now. All Chromebooks will also be Linux laptops going forward. Google has announced that all new Chromebook devices will be Linux ready. So right now they're running, just the Android.
So right now they actually run Chrome OS, which is based on Debian Linux. So they're running Linux under the hood, except they will not let you run other applications except for Chrome extensions, Chrome apps, right? The web-based apps. Well, they announced last year a handful of Chromebooks that were going to support running native Linux apps right from the Chromebook, basically turning it more into a Linux laptop. Now they've announced that from now on, every Chromebook will have that feature. Now, they aren't going backwards. Like if you already have a Chromebook and it wasn't in that list from last year, you're still out of luck. But if you buy a new Chromebook, the new ones that are coming out this year, they will all support Linux, which is neat because on one hand, they just made that platform a lot more powerful. They removed some of the walls or fences, the cage of Chrome OS, and now they've opened it up to run native Linux apps. But at the same time, we have a follow-up article from Android Police where Google giveth and Google taketh away, right? So they've given us Linux apps on all these Chromebooks. They have also announced that they are deprecating the Windows dual boot feature that they were rolling out last year. I think we reported on this one back in October, if I remember right. But either way, they had a feature that had a weird name, which I've forgotten. Altaz, there we go, called Altaz, that would allow you to install pretty much any operating system, including Microsoft Windows, onto a Chromebook. And there's really no reason Windows couldn't run on it because most of the Chromebooks have like Atom processors or ARM, and there's a Windows version of ARM. It sucks, but it does exist. So, if people want to do that, they should be able to. Google has killed that project off. And so now you just have Chrome OS, and that's it.
I was really confused by that first article's title. I was like, yeah, they were always Linux laptops because technically Chrome OS is based on the Linux kernel. But then when you read through that, I knew a few people who, got around it and used tools like Crouton, which could work, but now it seems to be, we are okay with doing this. So might have to look into a Chromebook just to see what happens.
Yeah, and with Crouton, you actually weren't running that Linux distro from the laptop itself. It was a container. So you were running on the same kernel that was already running as part of Chrome OS, then running your applications on top of it, which, while nice and speedy, is not exactly native, right? And this is now native support. So if you have a need for that, it works really well.
Jules Wang, the author of that second article, looks just very disinterested in his photo, doesn't he? Google's killed our dreams.
Says he joined the Android police team in 2019, so maybe he's
not happy about that move, or that he gave his driver's license photo for the for his byline there.
He's like, man, the new guys always get stuck with the crappy Chromebook articles. This is supposed to be Android police. This isn't even running Android.
All right, moving to Slashdot, where there are no images. Google recalls its Bluetooth Titan security keys because of a security bug. So these are the physical keys we talked about, like the dual factor, multi-factor authentication things.
Yeah, this is a big deal. So, and honestly, this is probably one of the biggest news articles I saw this week. Google has been pushing for multi-factor authentication, or at least 2FA, for quite some time. And initially, they partnered with YubiKey. We've interviewed YubiKey before. Just a great company. I use their keys myself personally. Google was using YubiKeys with all of their employees, everybody. And then all of a sudden, one day, they said, you know what? We're going to create our own key. And they created the Google Titan key, or I think they acquired somebody. But either way, they started to put out their own key. And it was really confusing. Like, YubiKeys are so cheap. Why did they decide to enter into this market? And the rumor was that Google wanted to have Bluetooth functionality with their multi-factor authentication. And Yubico said, you can't make it secure. Like, Bluetooth is not secure enough. There's flaws in the way it does handoffs, and you just can't rely on Bluetooth. So YubiKey, even today, does not have a Bluetooth authenticating key. They have NFC, but not Bluetooth. When Google rolled out the Titan key, if you go to buy it, it's $50, and you get a standard USB key, and you also get a Bluetooth key. So Google said, if you won't give us our Bluetooth key, we're going to make it ourselves. And that Titan key launched to the public several months ago. And it's been out there. A lot of people have started to use it. And then they announced this week they're recalling every single Bluetooth Titan key that has been sold due to a Bluetooth flaw. There was a flaw in how the handoffs are managed, and it needs to be recalled. So on one hand, it's got to be kind of a good day for Yubico to say, like, well, we kind of warned you guys. But at the same time, it's not like they're going to get Google back as a customer. Google's already rolled out their own physical key, so they don't really benefit from it. But it does just go to show you that when it comes to multi-factor authentication, those other factors aren't always perfect. And we've seen that with the text message SMS codes that everybody was happy with, and then all of a sudden you see articles like Gizmodo had one saying, this is super weak. It's not weak. It just has an attack vector like everything else does. So you got to combine it with something else that doesn't and try and win.
For some reason, when I read this, I was like, I didn't even know, because when the Titan key came out, I did a little bit of research, looked at the YubiKeys versus those. I didn't even pay attention to the Bluetooth part, because if I wanted it to be secure, I was just planning on always having the physical USB key and just not having the Bluetooth key. For some reason, it makes me feel weird to be able to do that at a distance, period.
Yeah, because Bluetooth, I mean, their advertised range is BS, but the real range is up to like 30 feet. Yeah. And so you could be in the next room and your key would show as present. That is not really that big of a security concern for most of us, but it is a concern.
Yeah.
Well, they do mention that that even the faulty keys still protect against phishing attacks. So
sure. But they don't really say, like,
how
exactly. Yeah.
Carry on. I'm confused.
That's PR people.
Yeah.
We got to find the silver. There's got to be a silver lining here somewhere.
They are still a lovely looking key. That's it.
The white is pristine on them.
They will still survive a run through the wash cycle.
Exactly. All right. Over on Naked Security by Sophos, update WhatsApp now. One call could give spies access to your phone. That was tough to say because the punctuation in the middle of the sentence because it's WhatsApp now.
Yeah.
So they're saying if someone called me and I answered it, they'd be able to access my information then?
So we talked about this earlier in the week, right?
It's actually worse than that.
If they call and I don't even answer? Is this like that FaceTime?
I was really confused because I don't use WhatsApp. So the headline sounded really, really bad. And that usually tells me that it's been sensationalized. So then I had to go talk to people that use WhatsApp and learn a little bit about how it works. Justin, you were with me when we were doing this, so we learned about it. And then we learned out this is really bad. Like this is a really, really bad one. So there is a exploit in the WhatsApp client on Android and iOS. Now this is what kind of set up my antenna to know this was a big one because iOS is so locked down that an attacker with one phone call could call your device. You don't even have to answer it. You might not even see the ring, and then they can exploit your WhatsApp client and then start to do all sorts of nefarious things completely without you being aware. Now,
And like without being in the call log, you not know about it.
Wow.
yeah. And
So you're already infected.
Well, I don't have the WhatsApp.
Oh, well, that's good.
on Android, they allow third-party applications to access their call log and to access the ability to make phone calls and stuff. On iOS, they do not, right? They don't allow that. So I was thinking, how does that work? How does it intercept it? Because I know Apple does it with their own. Like if you add a credit card to Apple Pay, and it says we're going to send you a text code to authenticate that card, and it texts it to your phone, Apple Pay automatically picks that up and processes it. So I know they tap into it, but they don't allow third parties. Well, in this case, what I didn't realize is that when you sign up for WhatsApp, it's a chat app, but they also give you a voice number. You actually have voice over IP functionality inside of the WhatsApp client, so you can do voice conferencing and voice calls. Well, that's what they're exploiting. They're making a call to your WhatsApp number. So now iOS and Android aren't there to protect you. It's the app itself. And once they're in, they're able to access your information, download your contact list, place calls on your behalf, do all sorts of interesting things.
Yeah, and this is a shock, too, because, WhatsApp is owned by Facebook. And when you think Facebook, you think security.
Exactly.
Wasn't that WhatsApp big claim to fame that they had end-to-end security, right? If you make a call or whatever, it's encrypted from end to end. Yeah. Well, I'm sure the attacker's call is encrypted end to your end.
There you go. $19 billion, I think, was the purchase price for WhatsApp.
Now, they have patched it, and they so it's in both app stores, so that's why this article is titled, Update WhatsApp Now! Get out there, update it, right? So you should do that if you use WhatsApp. They have fixed it. Otherwise, people could be accessing your phone, and you wouldn't even know it.
Horrible. All right, back over to Tom. So I don't use it, so I don't care.
Yeah, me either.
Yeah.
And you don't either?
Nope.
Which, that was the other thing in the article, because it said, like, they had 1.5 billion
It was like
users.
1 out of 4.
Yeah, well, there's 6 billion people on the planet,
Do
right?
they count all the Facebook users? Like, do I have a WhatsApp account that I
So
don't know
that's
about?
actually why Facebook bought them, is because they had a giant user base. They had at the time, I don't know if they've gained very much or changed very much as far as user base, but it was an acquisition of like users whenever Facebook bought them. But it still ended up being like 1 out of 4 people.
So we started polling people around the office, and like we just found one person that actually used WhatsApp, right?
Yep.
And some people.
So who do they talk to?
Some of
1.49
for our audience, they don't know Angie, but you guys do. So I just assumed Angie would use WhatsApp, and so I asked her, and she laughed at me like, I don't use WhatsApp. So 1.5 billion people. Anyhow, so jumping over to more security exploits, right?
All right, yes. Intel's new Spectre-like flaw affects chips made since 2008. And there's actually an update in this article as well about what a fix that's out to.
Yeah, Intel kind of botched up their PR on this one. So this is another Spectre-like exploit. We've been dealing with these. They come out, like one every other month now? And they're bad, right? They're bad because they're exploiting hardware, which means we can't really effectively patch it. And instead, it's being left up to the operating system vendors to try and patch this. And just like Spectre, it's allowing the multi-thread or the hyper-threading functionality in most processors to leak a little bit of information about what they're handling. software needs to be able to see that to figure out whether they can actually run simultaneously with other code, and that's leaking data. That's bad. So what set this one apart, because we do have a crowded field of exploits in this area now, is that a Intel rep made a comment saying that customers should disable hyperthreading to prevent this attack. And that is actually true. Like if you disable hyperthreading, that's what's leaking this information. Actually, all of the Spectre and Meltdown and so on, if you disable hyperthreading, that will that'll kind of mitigate that. But for most people, this attack is not realistic, right? It's a very difficult attack to pull off, and it's focused mostly on people that are running multi-tenant virtualization environments. So if you're not doing that, the risk on this stuff is really, really, really low. Turning off hyperthreading, though, is a constant thing. If you turn that off, you take a performance hit, and Tom's Hardware did a great job of following up on this. So in this article, they just say, like, you'll take a performance hit. But they followed it up by evaluating some Macs. And I think we had a Phoronix article a few months ago where they evaluated some Linux and Windows machines where you take a performance drop, and what they're reporting is up to 40% with Intel vulnerability mitigations. And this is why Linus Torvalds had made some comments that we reported on last week. They're actually baking it into the Linux kernel where you can choose whether these mitigations are on, and they're going to start turning the mitigations off by default. And that way, if you're concerned about them, you can turn it on. You'll take that 40% performance hit. But for everybody else, they'll be off. They can run at full speed. And the thing Justin and I were joking about before the show, if you buy a Mac, it's already overpriced significantly from any other vendor. To then take a 40% performance hit to just shed that right off the top, that's ridiculous. So these fixes are a real problem. And Intel hasn't even figured out a way to fix this in hardware yet. So it's not like you can just buy a new CPU. This is just a problem we're going to have to deal with for the foreseeable future.
And this kind of comes from, this followed a long line of processor upgrades or updates that just led this down this road. So the entire architecture is based on a set of thoughts that lead to all these sampling attacks and stuff. So,
right.
I mean, I'm not worried about it. And yes, I am. I do have a Mac, and so does Peter. I'm not going to turn it on. I'm not worried about it. So I'm not going to take that 40% hit.
Yeah, I barely understand it, so I'm not turning it on.
Well, so the challenge, though, is if Apple decides to push that fix out, you're not involved in that decision anymore. So, and for all you know, you could be taking that 40% hit right now and not even know it. And just instead, you might be thinking, man, it's time to buy a new laptop. Business model.
So what you're telling us is we should start a computer company where we manufacture and then, it's great. About a year from now, just push it out. Turn it on.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's called Apple.
Oh,
Don't they already?
they already beat me to it.
They turned on your battery already.
Done.
Yeah. Good stuff.
It's fun.
All right. But a company that would never do anything like that, Microsoft, is up next on Phoronix.com. Microsoft confirms WSL to coexist with WSL2, other Windows subsystem for Linux details. So I saw the word Linux and Windows here. Don, is this your dream?
It's close. We covered this one last week that Microsoft announced WSL2, so the Windows subsystem for Linux. We've been able to run Linux distros in a shell, basically, on the Windows operating system, but it wasn't real Linux, right? It was the Windows kernel running underneath, and they were translating all of the process calls from Linux via the Windows API. So it wasn't native. With WSL2, it is native. You actually do have a true Linux kernel developed and maintained by Microsoft that is powering WSL2. And I think that's about the extent of the details we had last week. More details have come out, which is what Phoronix is summarizing here. For example, you'll be able to run WSL2 side by side with regular WSL. And they revealed that it is actually powered by Hyper-V. And Hyper-V is not present in every version of Windows, but they're saying that WSL2 will actually be supported even in like Windows Home, which is pretty telling that when they say Hyper-V is not supported in the Home Edition, it might not be supported, but it's actually there. It's there powering something, and likely your entire desktop environment is being rendered through it. So they're kind of piggybacking off of that. So it was really neat to see that. Also, the fact that it can run side by side means we're going to have various various variants of WSL2. That's a stupid sentence, but so we'll likely see Debian and RHEL and each of those various ones in their WSL2 incarnations. And that is all supposed to be coming soon. They're working to bake that into the insider track as we speak, which means we should have it in the next probably 3 to 4 months.
Something that caught my eye, and that's just because I've played around with Docker and various incarnations of Docker on a Windows machine. If you're using WSL2, you cannot use VirtualBox or VMware. Just they can't coexist because of the virtualization technology, right?
Right. Yeah, that's true. In fact, on the laptop I'm on right now, I'm running Windows, and I have VMware Workstation installed, and it will not let me install Hyper-V if I want to right now, which means I wouldn't be able to use WSL2 unless I removed VMware Workstation, which honestly, I really like WSL2, but if I have to pick, I'm going to pick VMware Workstation. And my laptop dual boot, so I can just boot into Linux if I want to go native. So,
But I can't do that on my Chromebook.
Well, you wouldn't have to on your Chromebook because you
Because
can
I
run
can't run
Linux
the Windows.
natively. Yeah, you couldn't run Windows.
Yeah, but I don't know if I would put Windows on a Chromebook to
run
then
Linux.
use VMware Workstation or WSL2 to run Linux.
Look, you don't need to know why I want to do the things I do.
You could
You're
run that,
right.
That Windows S garbage where it only runs 3 applications.
Yeah.
I've been out of the
One of
Windows
them
game
being
for a while.
Linux.
Yeah.
All right, last article over here on ZDNet. Sticking with the Microsoft theme, Microsoft recommends using a separate device for administrative tasks. Microsoft security team publishes basic advice for securing corporate networks. So I have to carry 2. This is why I need a folding second computer I can put in my pocket.
So I think this one qualifies as a WTF article.
It does.
And the main reason here is Microsoft for years has advocated that you need to have separation of responsibility, and that if you're a network administrator, like let's say you're an Active Directory administrator, you should have a domain admin account and you should have a separate regular user account. And that totally makes sense, right? Because if I'm in Microsoft Word writing a letter, which I never do, but if I was, and I was logged in with an admin account, Word could do all sorts of admin-y stuff, and that could cause problems. As a regular user, that doesn't happen. And then when I want to do admin-y stuff, I just launch a window as that administrative user and perform the action. So that's what they've advocated for 2 decades now. And all of a sudden, they come out this week, and not just anybody, it's Microsoft's actual security team. And what they said is, it's not enough to have 2 different user accounts. You actually need to have 2 completely separate pieces of hardware. You should have your regular user laptop and your admin laptop or desktop or whatever. And to me, this is like giving up. They're giving up. They're just saying, screw it. We can't secure our applications and admin accounts. So you know what? Get this second machine and that'll do it. It doesn't make any sense to me. So I'm really surprised they would come out and announce this. It's not, most environments, it's not like we're dealing with the nuclear missile launch codes where we need 2 people to turn a key simultaneously, that kind of stuff. But we've got really good security. We kind of have the 2 keys with 2FA or MFA and all these other things. It seems like just going to a second machine is just admitting that weakness and saying, we just can't do it. Like they're not even saying a virtual machine is good enough, right? Like I can't have an admin VM and a regular user VM. You need to have 2 pieces of hardware, and that just seems ridiculous.
Yeah, I'm not going to do that, I don't think.
I'm gonna be honest with you. I read like part of the article and I was like, "Yeah, I'm not doing that. I can't. Like that doesn't make any sense to me."
Like, hold on, I got to do some online banking. Let me get my other.
I mean, obviously, I log in with my admin account and turn on macros, and then just go find random Excel documents to open.
I liked how they indicated, though, that for this admin machine, if you keep reading, where they tell you what you should do to the admin machine, like it should always be kept up to date. So does that mean our other
the
machine?
other one, just let it
whatever,
go.
it's fine. But this one, it should always be kept up to date.
So your personal machine could be running Windows XP, and we're cool, right?
Yeah, apparently.
Sure,
yeah.
why not? Yeah.
Or maybe some competing operating system like Mac OS.
Yeah, and you do that thing with macros. I download every exe I can find from every email as well.
And right click and run as admin.
You got to see what happens. How do you know if it's malicious or not?
Yeah,
That's true. Yeah. Hey guys, this one's bad. Don't open it.
yeah.
This one's
Also,
phishing.
you already know it's
Yeah.
bad.
No, it's my air-gapped machine.
Yeah. They go on to recommend some other things that are of marginal security basis. Like they actually recommend having a separate user namespace in your forest just for the admin users, which is another area where you're kind of just admitting defeat and saying, we can't even have these user accounts grouped together. There's a lot of stuff in here that is pretty far-reaching. And I guess I get it. If you are, Microsoft is the most valuable company in the world, aren't they? They crossed over $1 trillion, and is anybody else at that level? Like them and Apple were neck and neck.
Yeah, I
But
thought Apple was at $1 trillion.
Microsoft
too.
bumped them.
Did they? Okay.
So, if you're running a company of that value, then you might need or feel the need to go to these extreme measures because, hey, there's probably attacks out there that we don't even know about yet.
Sure.
Right? But it just seems like since they're the ones who control the operating system and they're saying they can't trust their own operating system enough, that's not really a vote of confidence.
No,
So,
it sure isn't.
yeah.
All right. Well, you guys did a couple interviews while I was gone, so let's get to one of those. The first one is Altaz Valani from
Valani.
Valani.
He's not a villain.
I don't know. I wrote these things down here. See, that's why I'm counting on you to tell me more about the research director at Security Compass. So, Don, what's that all about?
So Security Compass is a company that helps other companies implement a security policy, like validate that their developers are doing secure software development, which Justin will admit most developers aren't thinking about on a regular basis. So we're going to get a chance to talk to him and learn about how they do that, and achieve that insurmountable task of getting somebody like Justin to write secure code.
And so no one got bingo in that time. So now is my chance to catch up as we head over to that interview. So let's go ahead and take a look at that right after this on Technado.
My name is Dana Morrison. I'm the IT director at Grace Christian School in Raleigh, North Carolina. IT directors often hoard so much knowledge that it's hard for their team members to learn. IT Pro TV has given us the ability to level up our technicians to a point where they can decide this is important for me to learn. I would recommend IT Pro TV to any IT team. It's just a great tool for any IT professional.
All right, welcome back, everybody, to Technado. And as promised, we are here with Altaz Valani, who is a research director at Security Compass. We're going to learn a little bit about their organization as well as his role inside of it, and so it should be a pretty exciting time. Altaz, first off, I want to thank you for joining us all the way from, you're actually in Canada, correct?
That's correct, in Toronto.
So the glory of the internet is we don't necessarily know where people are. So to get us started here, why don't you tell us a little bit about Security Compass?
Sure. So Security Compass is a company that's focused in the cybersecurity space. We specialize in helping companies achieve what we call continuous compliance. So we usually have security teams, and then we've got risk teams, and we've got dev teams, and we try and bring these teams together through a product that we have, which enables them to communicate so that the information that needs to go across these teams is done in a seamless way. So we have that from a product standpoint. We also have a team that does training for secure coding practices, operational security practices, and we have a team that does consulting, which is primarily on penetration testing from a security perspective.
And, a lot of that is stuff that should be in pretty much every company's portfolio. But I think we see a trend right now that a lot of organizations are moving very, very fast and deploying technologies really quick. They're moving into the cloud at a accelerated rate, which means a lot of new infrastructure that they're not well versed in. So there's a lot of room for mistakes. And it sounds like that's kind of that space where you work in, is that you guys team up with other companies to help them overcome their security obstacles?
Absolutely. So the vision of our company is to help organizations to manage their cybersecurity without slowing them down. And this has direct relevance to what you were just talking about, where we've got teams moving very rapidly, trying to execute in DevOps lifecycles, for example, with short bursts and increments. How do we ensure that we put security into this pipeline without it interfering with what the objective is, which is to get things out the door?
All right, so I'm going to make fun of Justin here for a minute because I really view the root of all security flaws as being the developers, and so part of that is people like Justin, and
I don't disagree with you.
Readily admit to, but also this kind of culture that we have now, where there's a lot of things like CI/CD, right? The continuous integration, continuous deployment, where let's say, Justin, you write a web application for us, right? And then we bring in security auditors. They pore over it, every line of code, and they verify, yes, this is good, it's safe, we roll it out. But if you're continually advancing that software, if you're doing pushes on a weekly basis, it's near impossible to stay up on that, right? To make sure that you don't reintroduce vulnerabilities or introduce new ones. So when somebody teams up with Security Compass, what does that look like? Are you guys, you're sending somebody on site to continually monitor this stuff, or it's set at scheduled intervals? How does that kind of auditing work?
Yeah. So what we usually do is we do have a team that will help get things set up if there's a process that's broken. In this case, you were talking about essentially the convergence of what's happening on the dev side with the ops side, which is in the industry, we've coined that as DevOps, but it's trying to bring these teams together. So we certainly can help with that. The tool itself, what it does is it sits at a layer above the DevOps flow. So it will integrate with all of the tools that are there in the DevOps lifecycle. So Jira, you might have certain other ALM tools, you might have your testing tools, your code scanners. And what it also does is it allows the opportunity to inject security requirements. And these requirements are brought in from a lot of the very common standards that are out there. NIST 853, we've got ISO 27001. So by taking these clauses from these particular standards and frameworks, we pull that, translate that into actionable tasks, and push that downstream into the ALM and the dev cycle, the DevOps cycle, essentially. And then as these teams are executing on their work, we're able to pull and extract that information, the metadata from these systems, and come back. And because of the mapping, we are able to then see what your security posture is and what your mapping is against certain security compliance requirements.
This is one of those things where I admit I'm actually more security minded now since, I've been hanging out with Don and stuff, because he just makes me really paranoid sometimes. And he's like, look, this is all that's broke. But some of the times it was, for me, I was building software. I didn't know this was a bad thing, right? And part of this workflow is that ultimately the goal is to help the developers more or less learn those things? Is that what you're pushing back down into there, or are there other associated tasks and such that are going on?
No, it essentially is an enabler to go in there and make sure that you're coding security. So for example, when you push things down to the DevOps workflow, it isn't just a story that gets pushed down. Along with the story comes a link to a just-in-time video, for example. If, for example, we're talking about SQL injection, what does that SQL injection mean? What does it mean in a Java context? What does it mean in a C# context? So it's advice that is pushed down as well. So you can imagine the use cases for something like this. As an example, you've got a highly mobile workforce in the DevOps environment. Bringing people in and training them through extensive, long-term kind of, long hours kind of training is somewhat difficult. But if you push this kind of a model in bite-sized incremental modules, people can go in, there's advice being given, there are code samples, there's a story attached to it, there's a test case attached to it. Plus, as you execute, the developer will come in and the developer will say, yep, I actually did this. And then we have a secondary verification that comes in, for example, from a code scanner or from an automated test result. We pull both of these in, and then we say the developer said this and the automated testing said this. And if any one of those are amiss, then we come back and say, sorry, there's something that's not right here. If they're both okay, then you have a dual attestation that goes back and provides assurance that says we have indeed accomplished this as it goes back to the policy.
No, that's really cool because, like you mentioned, Justin, where you might be a phenomenal PHP developer or JavaScript or whatever. Yeah, I know you hate PHP, but a phenomenal developer in one language, but you don't necessarily know what a SQL injection attack is, or maybe you just accidentally had an input field that you didn't bother validating the input on. So something scans that, detects that, alerts you, and then explains exactly what that problem is. And SQL injection specifically is always in the top of the OWASP top 10, this list of 10 development mistakes that everybody should know about, but not everybody does. So, having that second set of eyes looking for those is neat. Now, I'm curious how that actually functions. Like let's say that we're using Git repositories. So anytime somebody makes a code change, they do a pull request, and that request needs to be reviewed before it's integrated in. So would the Security Compass solution then review those pull requests? Is it actually looking at the code base, or is it we have to package it together and deploy it some other way? How does that interface?
Yeah. So let's start from the beginning of the workflow. This would start with, let's say, a project manager or lead going in, and it could even be someone from the security side saying, we need to be NIST 853 compliant, as an example. Now, we've got in our system the NIST 853 mapping against several different application archetypes. So the project manager would go in and select, all right, I want to do NIST 853 against let's say a Java application or a web application or a mobile Android application, and we've got the mapping that exists that maps these NIST 853 policies against these application archetypes. So what happens is as you go in and select these application archetypes, it essentially acts as a filter, which, because of the mapping that we've got, will tell you this particular clause in the standard maps to this particular activity in the development space. So by selecting the application archetype, you're essentially filtering what clauses are relevant. And then what happens is you go in and you push a button, and it pushes the stories that you have now essentially created through the system down into your application lifecycle management. Now, where a repository like Git would come in is a developer will be working on code. There is a story that they are now tracing through the lifecycle. As they pull code down or push code up, that is being validated against a story that is essentially something that is mapped upwards to a given compliance policy. So to them, it just looks like regular coding, right? If we're looking at SQL injection, for example, the requirement comes in, but the source code management system, as you pull the code down, you map it against the story. So it's not as though the story maps to Git directly. Like, it's not, we don't integrate directly and push stuff into Git. We push it into whatever system people are using. So it's not specific. So as they pull down the code, whatever happens to be your system that you're managing stories with, we end up pulling it from there. And that's essentially how it goes forward. Now, when you're done with that story, you've tested it, you put your code back up in Git with a check that, yes, I've done this and I believe that this has met the security requirement. And what happens is, as you put it into Git, then you could have a tool like Jenkins that will go in and it will kick off an automated code scan. It does the code scan. We integrate with that code scanner. We pull results. We, in fact, integrate with Jenkins. So you can even go in there at that level if you're looking for orchestration. We pull the stuff in, pull the metadata stuff inside, and at that point, we're able to tell what you achieved and what you didn't achieve from a security perspective. So from that standpoint, because we sit above the development workflow, right? We sit more at the program level where we've got multiple projects that are on the go. There could be multiple repositories. There may be multiple tools. We integrate with a bunch of these, and we're able to pull this stuff in. So if you consider it from a program perspective, you may have several applications because you've got several projects on the go. You should be able, in near real time, be able to pull out and see what the security posture of any of your projects, any of your applications are. And that's where we come in.
Now, this is one of those things where, based on what you described, I'm fully on board, because sometimes it's just overwhelming for me. I'm like, it's injection attacks. Whatever. I'll worry about them later. However, people are involved, right? You're trying to automate as much as possible, make it to where you do not have an excuse to not do these things. Yeah. However, as a developer, I tend to be a lazy sort. So that kind of brings me, for the stories, it's kind of a compound question. For the stories, is there like an additional kind of set of tasks that come in? Let's say I pushed up the code, it goes through a code scanner, you get informed, hey, this is an injection attack site. Like, this is a problem. Is there an additional story, or does it like modify the original story in this management? This is very super specific, but
yeah, no. It's all good. Good question. So if we stay within the workflow, within the DevOps workflow, the fact that the code scanner went and produced a result that said this is not passable, immediately you would hope that within your Jenkins, your DevOps workflow, it would go back to the dev to say, hey, you know what, you need to fix this. But if for some reason we still try and push this out, our system would go in and say, the dev said yes, the code scanner said no, you need to make a decision now on whether or not you think this is something that you need to take a look at. Generally we will halt it. We will just say, stop, you need to take a look at this and don't push this through. But there may be certain cases, if you find that, there's a legitimate risk that you're willing to take on, then you push it through, but it will give you that information.
So let me give you a scenario that I've struggled with a few times, and I don't know a good solution, so we'll see if you do. Let's say that you have customers that are in Russia, right? And so they've got some pretty strict rules in how you can handle citizen data over there. One of the rules states that any data on Russian citizens needs to be maintained on servers that are in Russia. So, I may have a story in place, or it's just part of my security policy that says, obviously, we need to adhere to that so that we can legally do business. Now, on a developer side, or even, on the sysadmin side, I can validate that pretty easy. There's a database here. It's tied to a server. It's got an IP. Let me go figure out where that resides, and we can identify where it is. But for a code scanner, that seems like a difficult one to test for. So are you able to test for things like that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So there are a couple of nuances to what you were asking. So let's start with the point where we go in and we've got a privacy regulation, let's say, or a standard that we want to adhere to. So we have that in our system. We've got things that could go in there and they can help you to create a story that gets pushed down into the DevOps lifecycle to say, this is what you need to do to manage security and privacy. As you're going through this, once you've done it, you come back and you say, this is now what I've achieved. A code scanner generally works pre-deployment. Once you're inside a deployment or operations environment, then you need a different set of tools that will go in and that will help you to validate the stuff that you've done. So that's where that layer, like where Jenkins comes in, for example. You could go in and you could integrate with, let's say, creating a manifest or using any kind of a tool like Puppet or Chef or something like that to go in and ensure that what you've got set up in the prod environment is in fact what you need to be there. And it will come back and give you a positive with what's happening on the Jenkins side. And then when it comes back and we extract information from there, we can then see that you were green-lighted prior to deployment. So from the perspective of any compliance or any regulation, the key question once that DevOps workflow is done is what's the value of that bit of information back to the business? And the challenge that we've seen historically is usually we've got our DevOps team speaking in technical language, whereas what the business is really looking for are things like, am I compliant? Because it's a risk question now. Are we resilient? Have we gone in and done everything we could to recover and make sure our systems are tightened and hardened and so on and so forth? And are we moving forward in a way that's efficient and that's really revenue generating? So are we essentially getting the kind of velocity that we're looking for? So those are the kinds of questions that need to get answered from a business context. And so by putting in this middle layer where we sit, we translate these metrics that come in from the DevOps workflow into the business speak. And so they're able to run a report and be able to see where we're red lighted, green lighted, and from there make an informed decision about whether or not they want to take on that particular risk from a business standpoint.
Well, I'm glad you brought up business because let's step away from the technical side of things and go a little more to like the legal side. On the business side, if a company doesn't even know what they're supposed to be compliant with, right? So maybe they're a medium-sized business, they're growing fast, and as they grow, there's thresholds that you cross where all of a sudden GDPR applies or other policies. So are you able to help with that? Like if a company doesn't have a security policy, can you guys help draft that or at least establish what that baseline should be?
Yeah, so the tool we've got can help teams and enable them to create that security culture. There are things that are outside of our system as well that would be quite useful. So for example, if there's a team that's not really comfortable with security and what they're trying to achieve is to educate the teams on what security is, rather than going through and doing a threat modeling activity, they might want to use, let's say, a misuse case or something like that to keep it kind of lightweight, just to open up the conversation to say, let's create an awareness that this is the kind of stuff that happens. That's not something that our system will do, but it's something that comes alongside with what our system is capable of doing. If there's a company that has no security standard, as an example, one of the use cases that we've seen with the use of our product is how do you take a policy that you've created internally, a standard, and very quickly roll that out. So we've got one company, for example, that had to roll this out across several hundred teams. To go in and train each team is really prohibitive. But by using a system like this, because it directly integrates with the Scrum teams and what they're working on, you're able to take a policy, push that through, and now you can track and see whether or not that policy is being adhered to throughout the life cycle. And if it's not, then now it gives you some smaller subset of teams that you can then focus on to help them perhaps remediate or get them down the learning curve on security, things like that. So, yes, there are companies that need to push things out. There may be companies that are mature that need to comply. There's a broad range of companies, that could benefit.
Now, I've already exposed that I was horrible with security, but you were like, you didn't have a security policy, you have no idea what's going on. But this tool can help. However, I'm kind of like, do you offer the capability to help bridge that gap? Like the just-in-time thing, that really makes sense to me because I don't want to have to learn all this information up front.
Yes.
That's how I got overwhelmed. I was like, we'll worry about it later. But really, you may have existing software. You may have existing things that do have an issue. How do you bridge that gap while we're slowly fixing those, but also building that into the DevOps lifecycle? Is that a service you offer, or do your tools help with that? Or are you just like, well, you better fix it now?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a good use case to kind of drill down a little bit on. When we take a look at, first of all, when policies are created, one big mistake that a lot of companies make is they will generate, shall and should statements. You shall do this, you should do that. Essentially, they come from policies, which become the kind of things you must do and the things that you should ideally do. This gets pushed down directly to our dev teams, and they can't really grasp how they're supposed to instantiate a high-level policy like that into something that's executable. So this is what has been defined as a policy to execution gap, right? That's what the system is intended to do. It's intended to fill that policy to execution gap. To your question now about how do we go in and analyze our existing systems versus, let's say, greenfield applications. For a greenfield application, you go in there and you answer user questions, and you're, about your uncle, you're basically running. For applications that you don't have that with, what you do is you model the application archetype inside the system that we've got for your infrastructure. And then what you do is, as you go through and you see the kinds of stories that are generated, you're now able, through the stories that have been generated, be able to assess how much time, how much resourcing, how much is it going to cost us for us to go and essentially execute against these stories. Now, you may have a dozen applications. Some applications may be low-hanging fruit. By going through this lightweight kind of threat modeling type exercise where you just essentially look at the application archetypes and say, if this is a Java application, what would it take for us to securitize this Java application? And we want to be, let's say NIST 853 compliant. It will give you all the stuff that you need to do. And from that, you can pick the stuff that's low hanging. This makes sense, this makes sense, this makes sense. And then you take that, and that's the way that you can go in there and work with applications that already exist. So, again, going back from a business context perspective, this is extremely handy when it comes to dealing with managing cost and application portfolios. So a CIO, for example, could take a look at this and they could say, we need to modernize our applications. What do we need to focus on? And instead of taking the entire suite of applications, why don't we focus on those that we know that we can make more secure relatively easily so we can have a longer shelf life with those? And that's essentially how it works.
Now, let's take a policy regulatory compliance like GDPR, right? So GDPR has almost 100 articles in it that are things that we're required to live up to. So as a company, if I now fall under GDPR and I want to make sure I'm compliant, am I having to sit down and basically write rules for each of the articles that would apply to software development? Or is that like a pre-prepared package that you have that we just need to fit into our tools?
Yeah, so it's a pre-prepared package, but I also want to call out GDPR and ISO. There's many different standards out there. We focus specifically on application security as the space. That's the big thing that right now a lot of companies are struggling with. So there are all kinds of risk. There's risk on business continuity. There's business risk like on financials and stuff like that. But we've chosen that one vertical which is specific to application security. So if you take GDPR as an example, we will only pull out those articles that are relevant to security and privacy and put those through.
Yeah, some of the articles don't even have to do with your data at all. They just say like, if another law conflicts with this one, then we'll sort it out, and that doesn't really matter to us on the development side. So for everybody just tuning in, we are interviewing Altaz Valani, who is a research director at Security Compass. We've been talking about kind of what what Security Compass does, but let's change this up a little bit and talk about the remainder of 2019. Right, security is moving very quick. New laws are being passed all the time. Companies are learning about new steps they can take to secure their data. So what do you see as some of the big areas that we should be keeping an eye on as far as software development and security for the remainder of the year?
Yeah, so I'm seeing a really big convergence happening at this point. What we traditionally used to think of as compliance being a business issue, I'm seeing that converging with the SDLC. So I suspect that we will start to see software developers start to understand a little bit more about what it takes to audit software. And if we take a look at the corollary to that, if we look at what's happening in the audit space, and you take a look at, for example, what the ISACA community is working on, they are also training their people on things like cybersecurity, on coding. So I see that there's going to be a natural convergence of these two fields now coming together. So we should very easily look, not too long into the future and be able to see where, when we do software development, we are inherently thinking about compliance, about risk, about resiliency, and we are going to have tools that will facilitate that for us so we don't have to do a lot of this stuff manually. So that's the big thing that I'm seeing in terms of where that trend is headed.
You couldn't see it, but I could just see Justin's face drooping as you were saying all these things. But then when you mentioned the tools, it was all happy again.
Yeah, it's not so much. There was a lot churning through my mind because I was like, I've been trying to do that a little more, right? You're like, oh, well, you mean I shouldn't use eval everywhere? Whatever, it'll be fine. I shouldn't use 15 versions old, packages from NPM. But I was looking through your, kind of going along with that. You build these policies. You need to learn more. I noticed that you call out Java, .NET, PHP, C++, things of that. Those are very specific technologies, and that's something that when people have asked me about it, it becomes I'm like, well, here's the general sense of it. How do you address this specifically? Also, kind of along those lines, how do you address, because people love programming languages. Developer loves programming languages and new technologies and shiny new toys. How do you keep up with that, right? If I'm like, you know what? We're not going to use Java or .NET. We're going with Crystal or Rust or something.
Look at us where we use Haskell,
yeah.
Right? There's tons of security tools out there we can't use because we use a weird language.
Yeah. So how do you keep up with that?
Yeah. So let me back up a second and let's talk about where change actually occurs in this entire domain. So on the one hand, this is a spot-on question. We see a lot of changes in the dev space for sure, and that's typically, it comes through with new languages, new versions. So we go in and we are continually monitoring the new languages that come out. So we know that roughly on an annual basis, we're going to have new version of Android. We have to go back, we have to refresh, we have to do those kinds of things. But at the same time, we also, if we look at the regulations, those are changing as well. So the problem here is, how do you take two domains that are constantly changing and make sure that the mapping that exists between them remains constant, or at least consistent over time? And therein becomes where the value of something like this could come in, right? Now, do we do every single language? No. We are a commercial organization, so we will look for those areas where there's commercial opportunity, and then we essentially go and we make an investment in that space. Similarly, if we find that there are those that are asking for particular frameworks or standards, by all means, we will definitely go in there and make an investment in that direction as well. So we will try not to go too far ahead of where our customers are, and we will have regular interactions with them. We have a customer advisory board, and we work with them to make sure that we're kind of lockstep with what their needs are.
So I'm kind of wondering what the org chart for Security Compass looks like. Because if you're trying to stay up on dev languages and you're trying to stay up on compliance, you probably have like one attorney for every one developer. Is that?
All their attorneys are developers. You didn't know that? It's in there. I'm joking.
Yeah, I don't think that's possible.
I don't think that's actually true. If it is, your payroll must be astronomical.
Yeah.
So when we look at the system itself, it's not intended to take away from what legal teams do, nor is it intended to take away from what compliance teams or audit teams do. it's intended to be a support for them, right? So we're not a legal tool. We're not even going to, like, we don't make a claim that if you do what we do, that you're going to be compliant. Because, I mean, I work with standards groups, right? And we know that companies are going to tailor the standards to their own environment. So what we can do is we can provide you with the data. So either if you get audited or if it turns out that you need to move in a specific direction and need to make investments, make a sound decision. And then as you're working through this, automate as much of this as you can, which is essentially what we're trying to achieve here. So hence what we started the conversation with, which is about continuous compliance. If now we're looking at a convergence of compliance and the SDLC, essentially they're one and the same. So when we look at continuous compliance, just as we've been seeing continuous integration, continuous deployment, continuous compliance is just a natural progression of where this is all going to go.
Yeah. Now you mentioned earlier that it's really kind of giving you these multiple attestations that you did your due diligence, that you are compliant. So you've got the developers saying they did it. And now you've got the software tool that is validating and saying it. So I'm thinking about like cyber insurance, that a lot of companies are starting to take cyber insurance policies. And if something happens, if there is a breach or whatever, they've got to show that they did their due diligence. So would a system like yours be suitable for generating I don't even know what that would look like, just a signature paper that says, yes, here's where we double checked?
Yeah, usually when there's a breach, or even, if there's not a breach, but there's an audit that takes place, the goal is to provide the essence or validation that you had the intention correct. And if they walk in and it's like, I don't know, I think this is kind of what we do, or this team does it this way and that team does it that way, then it's very hard to prove that you've got something in place that you're making a concerted effort towards. Whereas if you've got a tool or a platform like this, then what you can do is you could say, look, we generate reports, we push this stuff into the ALM, and it makes it much more likely that they would look at this and say, yeah, it makes sense that you've got the sort of the pieces in place.
Now, Altaz, I want to switch gears just a little bit here, as I know we're running a bit short on time, but you are the research director for Security Compass, so you're not a salesperson or a marketer. You're actually involved in the creation of the product and the direction of the product. And I'm always curious to find out how people got into security or IT or whatever. But in your case, I'm extra interested because it's compliance, which is not really the most exciting kind of area in IT. So how did you end up in the spot that you're in? Yeah.
Honestly, I've got the best job in the world. I know you guys are going to say that about yourselves. I get it. So I've always been interested in software development. I mean, I'm one of those that started out, had the whole Commodore 64 thing and started to program and everything. And then as I started to go in and do some of the development, I also was always interested in security and in research. A few years back, I was working for an industry analyst firm, so there was a research element to that. And I would regularly have conversations with senior stakeholders, leaders, vendors, and it's a natural progression to go from a generalist industry analyst type of role into something that is more specific. And so I had a choice, and it was like, what is the next direction? And I wanted to stay in research, and so there was this opportunity that came up at Security Compass, and we were looking at growing the research team, and so my focus is really, as part of growing, it's not just focusing on what we do internally, but it's aggressively looking at how we can go out and we can participate in the creation of standards with other groups, talking to other people. We have partnerships with academia, with industry partners. So it in that sense, even though our focus is on compliance and risk as it pertains to the software development lifecycle, in the conversations that we're having, we rub shoulders with people that are setting policies at like a national level. Some are considering things at a global level. So it's exciting to be a part of something that is going to make a difference, for people. And it's going to be something that will be implemented that people can take a look at. And you can offer advice, you can offer your thoughts. So my role, part of my role when I go, for example, to a conference, it's to educate and it's to extend that body of knowledge that exists wherever these gaps are. And in some cases, I'll go where people are well versed in this area. I'll go to other places where people are just, this is totally new or foreign to them. So it's very diverse in that sense. And bringing in that business context, even when I work with standards groups, it's an eye-opener for them. They're like, well, we didn't think about it from this standpoint. And having that sort of technical background that I've got, plus the business background, kind of brings the two domains together. And that's where I see a lot of organizations and teams struggling right now. So I find it exciting.
Well, that is certainly cool. And I think for a lot of people, they start to see the I don't want to call it the exciting side of compliance, but at least where you really feel like you make a difference.
I could probably get on board with this. Like, if you're going to tell me what I did wrong, say, hey, this is how you fix this. Here's why. Let me keep you up to speed. I'm on board. Again, it was just kind of overwhelming. But when you told me you used to be a programmer, now you're a business, for some reason I think, are you writing business reports in Vim, or is that how that works for you?
No, not at all, not at all. It's interesting. We're if you look at where software is today, it permeates all roles essentially, right? I was having a conversation with the CFO, and we were talking about cybersecurity, and they're looking at it from a risk angle, which I get, but at the same time, what they're talking about from a risk standpoint has to translate into actionable activities that the dev teams need to essentially work on. So it all is, it kind of converges. It all sort of comes together.
All right. Well, Altaz, if any of our viewers want to learn more about Security Compass or follow some of the things that are going on over there, where is the best place for them to go?
You can go to our website. If anyone's interested in conducting joint research with us, by all means, reach out, collaborate. You can reach me on Twitter. You can reach me on LinkedIn. We've got webinars ongoing. There are conferences we go to. I would also even turn that around to say everybody has a role to play in this, and this is the researcher in me coming out. Let's get out there. Let's make a difference, right?
All right, and for our video viewers, you're seeing the links, but for everybody else, the website is securitycompass.com. Be sure to check it out. And Altaz, I want to thank you for taking the time to talk to us and help us learn a little bit more about what Security Compass does.
Oh, thank you. You guys are wonderful. Appreciate it.
All right, and for you, the viewers out there, thank you as well. But don't go anywhere, because we're going to be back with more Technado after this.
I'm James Packer. I'm the General Manager of Kirk ISS based in the Cayman Islands. I used IT Pro TV extensively in my last place. It grew very well, helped upskill the team. I had 110 engineers in the field, and we had dozens of IT Pro accounts with the guys training, and last year alone they passed over 40 certs by using the online training. I think I can safely say without IT Pro TV I wouldn't be where I was today, because I only got this job on the back of the qualifications I have.
All right, welcome back to Technado, and thanks to Altaz for that interview, and thanks, guys. And you can tell that we've just been putting down this bottle of champagne during that interview and having a big old party here. These hats were worth every dollar.
Yeah.
I've watched a number of other actually good tech podcasts, and most of them drink. I've noticed this pattern.
I'm seeing why.
I feel like we should reevaluate our alcohol policies.
Well, let's talk about that offline as we move to our next interview. We have Alcyr Araujo. He's the CEO of Mosyle, and so that is not Mozilla.
Right. The way it's spelled is like Mosyle, but it's pronounced Mosyle.
Yep. So what's this one all about, Don?
They're a mobile device management platform. So if you are deploying Apple devices in a school, business, whatever, you need to have some kind of control over them. Apple has a handful of tools that they've rolled out in weird ways. Mosyle has a very mature platform that does the same thing. So we're going to talk to him about all the stuff his platform can do and what separates them from the competition. And I'm saying his platform, he's actually the CEO and co-founder, so he knows a thing or two about what's going on.
I can't take you seriously in that hat.
I haven't moved. I'm real strict.
Yeah, the strings broke. The reason these hats we're joking about them is because they did not use staples.
Or tie it.
To put, or even tie these strings in. There's kind of a tension thing, and Don's little head was the only one that was able to
fit. If you guys had normal-sized heads.
I can't help it. It's hard to find a normal hat, much less a party hat that doesn't have staples.
All right, well, let's hear what Alcyr has to say about Mosyle, and we'll see if Don asked all the tough questions coming up right after this here on Technado.
Enjoying Technado? Then be sure to check out Ignite, another podcast from the Pro TV Network. Ignite highlights stories of leadership as host Vicky Guy interviews a new business person each week. Learn more at itpro.tv/podcasts.
Welcome back to Technado, everyone. As promised, we've got another interview in this episode, and we're going to be tackling MDM, or mobile device management. You know, a lot of companies are dealing with supporting mobile devices, or really just any kind of device in their organization. It's turning into a super headache. A number of companies have stepped up to solve that, and one of them is Mosyle, and we are fortunate enough to have Alcyr Araujo, who is the CEO and co-founder of Mosyle, right on the line with us. Alcyr, thank you for joining us. And for our viewers that haven't heard of Mosyle before, would you mind telling us a little bit about the company, like what your product is and what it does?
For sure. So we do mobile device management. For education and enterprise market with two different solutions. So basically, in the end of the day, we help schools and companies to use and manage their Apple device in the best way as possible, including iOS, macOS, and tvOS device.
All right, so you mentioned Apple devices, and schools are implementing a lot of things. So there's iPhones, iPads, Apple TV, and MacBook. I think pretty much covers the gamut of what we're seeing in a lot of environments.
Yes.
And you're able to support all four of those?
Yeah, we cover all the platforms for now, and of course, when you start, you just start with, which in our case, we just started with the iOS, and then we grew the product line to cover everything. And Mac is a big deal. It's a really sophisticated deployment, and the potential for the Mac is amazing. And we're really proud to offer one of the best solutions in the market now to manage the Macs.
And are you focused on that education market, or do you do enterprise corporations as well?
Education is really important for us. When I started Mosyle, we were not doing MDM, we were doing something different. We had a mobile-first learning management system. So, like, trying to explain that better, we were helping schools to adopt the iPads back in 2012. And because of that, we were pushing the iPads really hard to the schools, and they were understanding, or they were seeing us as the responsible for that project. So the issues with management, or the challenge with management, started to become something that customers were bringing to us, saying, hey, you guys are helping us with this deployment, with this solution, so please help us to manage the device as well. So education is really critical because it's how we start everything, doing another solution, and then we migrate to MDM. We have been doing MDM for education for several years now, and recently we add enterprise to our line. We really feel that we can help not only schools, but also companies using Apple device, and this is a market that's growing a lot, and we are really proud to be part of this growth.
Well, let's stick with schools for a moment. And I know
Sure.
a couple of years ago, one of the bigger Apple events, they got up and they announced their Apple Classroom offering, this new classroom management. And they were kind of light on the details on what all that meant for people. And, I kind of assumed that was going to be some kind of MDM, but I know that it really hasn't made a giant dent in that market. So how does that relate to Mosyle, or are they complementary, separate? What does that relationship look like?
That was a great question, and I'm glad you remember that day. I remember that day as if it was yesterday. So at that moment was the beginning of 2016. Actually, it was January 2016. We started a company in Brazil as a learning management solution. And in 2014, 2015, we decided to move the company here to specialize more in MDM. And at that time, I was basically developing the solution we offer to the education market right now. And then we got all that information in January. But in the end of the day, there was a game changer for the education market and for Apple customers and Apple partners. That was a really smart and amazing move from Apple to create a lot of important tools for schools. There's no overlap with MDM. That's the opposite. It's really Apple creating super important tools for MDM providers and for schools to have a better management. So at the end of the day, when you have the classroom management, Classroom app is a phenomenal tool. We're using a really safe and stable technology to connect teachers and students on the classroom. And it's our job as an MDM provider to automate that flow and to create the connection between the teacher's device and the student's device. And we do that remotely. At the same moment, Apple released Apple School Manager. Apple School Manager is a platform where schools can manage and create, manage Apple IDs for the students. So they were basically solving a question that was, hey, how can I have students creating their own Apple IDs and using for the school? So Apple came with a phenomenal way to address that, and the schools were able to have total control of the process. And on top of that, just offer a lot of features for students like storage on iCloud and things like that. And using Apple School Manager as a base, Apple was able to move the device enrollment program. That's basically a super important feature that Apple offers to their customers that allow us, MDM provider, to take control of the device since the very first moment. So on the very first minute of use of that device, our customers can be comfortable that the device is managed, the device is safe, all the apps to be installed there. And finally, Apple add or move the VPP to Apple School Manager as well, what's called today Apps and Books. So that moment that you mentioned was extremely important, and that's a game changer for Apple education market for sure. And I'm so glad for all the change that Apple introduced on that moment.
Now, this is one of those things. Sorry, I'm channeling my previous school teacher experience. Yeah, I was a school teacher. It's
That's great.
But one of the things that we had trouble with when we were bringing in devices, we were issuing devices, like there was a great deal of work. It was a lot of overhead, even just getting things set up, even if we were going to use a management system for, like, how easy is that? Or like you said, it takes over from the very moment. Is that something that Mosyle's like, all right, we're going to make it happen. There it is. You don't have to worry about anything. Because we actually didn't adopt technology just because it was hard to manage, hard to issue, hard to just anything.
Yes, you're correct. So if you just think about like a normal flow you would do with one device, like the device you go to the store and buy and try to set it up right now, and you multiply that for 1,000, 2,000, 50,000, it's like an unbelievable amount of work. But using features like device enrollment program and using a good MDM, you can basically remove all the work. So the way we work now with our customers, both on the enterprise and education market, is basically customers can go and create the profiles and choose what apps will be assigned to what device and students. And that's it. They can just get a box of a new iPad, close a box, hand it to a kid, and everything could be done automatically. There is no additional step, basically. They just turn the device on, connect to Wi-Fi, and from that moment, we automate everything. So it's a process with like zero work in terms of deploying the device manually. Everything's automated.
That's pretty awesome. And I do want to talk a little bit about corporations, right? So Apple did that huge announcement about all these great tools in the classroom. And a lot of us look at MDM solutions because schools really benefit from that. If you've got an iPad school where every student has an iPad, then it totally makes sense. But corporations, businesses, enterprises, they're deploying these devices at the same rate, and in some cases a higher rate than in the schools. And Apple really didn't do anything for them. You have the Apple Profile Manager and Apple Remote Desktop. I think I believe those are the only two enterprise management tools they even have anymore, and they're pretty basic. So, as far as enterprise support, would you be like a total replacement for those two tools, or do you integrate with them to provide the enterprise service?
Actually, it's a little bit different than that. So Apple has been adding a lot for enterprise as well. Recently, actually last year, we had Apple introducing Apple Business Manager. Apple Business Manager is a similar solution than Apple School Manager, but redesigned for enterprise. And it's helping a lot the enterprise market to buy a group of devices and find those devices on that platform assigned to an MDM in the same way education can do. And the MDM will take control in exactly the same way. So Apple is not only creating tools for education, they're creating a lot of great flows and tools for enterprise. And it really explains like this amazing growth we can see now on enterprise adopting Macs and Apple device. It's growing a lot every single day. we have a better day in terms of yesterday. It's more corporations coming, it's more customers coming to us and say, hey, we were really heavy on Windows, or we're only using Windows, and now we are giving our employees the option to choose the device they want to use, or we are going to Apple only, and we are adopt Apple as our only platform. And I believe it's all coming because of this hard work Apple is doing for the enterprise, creating similar tools for enterprise customers.
All right, let's focus on Mosyle specifically. So what are some of the tasks that we can perform, assuming that we've got all of our devices joined up into that single managed environment?
Yeah, so when we talk in MDM, we really have different moments when we can help. So the very first moment for sure is the deployment. We want to save a lot of time and automate as many tasks as we can. So a customer deploying iOS or macOS device using our solution, they can basically use some basic time to prepare their policies. They just do that one time and it be applied for any group of device. And after that is just really giving a box with a brand new device to an employee or a student, and we'll handle the whole flow. It also cuts time on the employee side. They don't need to go and install apps. They don't need to authenticate on their email, or they don't need to look for additional Wi-Fi passwords or set up printers. So there is an initial help with the deployments. After the deployment is really critical for IT teams, both at schools and enterprise, to maintain those devices. How can we make sure that we are updating the apps for the versions we need? How can we make sure that our critical apps are always updated based on new security release and things like that? How can we make sure we can update the OS for all the users at the same time? So the maintenance is really big as well in terms of MDM, and my goal is really having my customers setting the policies and forgetting, and it's my job to just automate the maintenance and take the device. And finally, we really have the security and the management, like what can be done on that device. And it's really different if you compare education with enterprise, and if you look to enterprise, it's really different in different corporations. But in the end of the day, having a way to remotely define what can be installed, what can be used, what time that can be used, in like a really detailed way, talking about apps, networks, VPNs and things like that, really can guarantee that that device will be used in the correct way to protect the kids, to making sure the kids are just accessing what they should be at the correct time, or to protect the company data, or to protect the employee. So at the end of the day, MDM can help with the whole flow, since the deployment until the maintenance and security for the device.
Now, those hand it out, deploy, sounds beautiful. One of the biggest concerns we had, though, is what happens if it disappears? Like, how do we recover it? How do we, like, is this something that Mosyle also accounts for? Like, do I get a text message and go, hey, it's at the corner of Houston and 13th or something? I don't know. Like, is that something you provide? And if so, like, to what degree is that provided? Or is this just something that you have to use the built-in tools?
No, as an MDM provider, yes, we can set the device in lost mode, and at that moment the device will be locked, and we can start to track where the device is. And it's really something that cannot be removed from whoever got the device or whoever found that device. The device will be in lost mode until we send a command to release the device. You can wipe, you can restart the device, doesn't matter. So we have a really fun case, like helping customers to find lost device. And in some moments they're really, really far away, but after some time we always find that, or because the device is connected and we were able to track that, or because someone that ended up just buying that device from someone that sold or someone that found, whatever, will need to call us and say, hey, I bought this device, but I'm here in one screen saying that this device is managed by you, and there's nothing I can do with the device anymore. So we can just put that person in touch with our customer, and the customer can understand what they should do for that case.
All right, for those of you just tuning in, we are interviewing Alcyr Araujo, who is the CEO and co-founder of Mosyle, the mobile device management platform. And on your website, it mentions that you do management for iPhone, iPad, and Mac. MacBook, Mac desktops, whatever, which all makes sense to me. But it also mentions Apple TV. And that one kind of surprised me to see that one because I never really thought of that as a managed device. I think of it as just, going home and watching movies. So how are you seeing people deploy that device and why would we need to manage it?
Yeah, we really have super different ways to use Apple TVs. So I do have Apple TVs in all my rooms, all my TVs. I just use streaming for everything now. But on the other side, if you go to a school or to a corporation, they basically have Apple TVs in all their conference rooms or all the classrooms. So Apple TVs are really powerful tool to work with the Macs and the iPads, and our users can basically control that remotely in a way that they can decide who is presenting what and automating that flow. So when you get to a conference room, you don't need to set up that Apple TV. It's really easy and you just start using it. So Apple TVs are a really important part of a Mac and an iOS deployment. And in some cases, Apple TVs are the main deployment. We do have a customer, a really interesting one, that they just manage Apple TVs, providing that technology for different hotels around the world. They outsource the Apple TV for each room. And what they want to offer basically is the experience for the guests to use the Apple TV as if they were at home. So it's a really safe way to go and use your credentials for Netflix, whatever streaming service we're using, connecting your iCloud, whatever. So you can really have the same experience with your content as if you were at home. And when they check out, we automate the wiping process for that Apple TV. So we'll clean everything, the Apple TV will be brand new, and the next guest will be able to start the flow over. So, and Apple is investing a lot on features for Apple TV remotely, and it basically, it's growing a lot.
Now, for some corporations, and actually for a lot of schools, they actually own all the equipment that's being handed out to the students. So locking that into an MDM platform makes a lot of sense. They can remote wipe, they control it, that's easy. But we're seeing a lot of places starting to go to more of a hybrid environment where you're able to bring your own device. So maybe a student or an employee already has their own iPhone or iPad. And that gets into a little bit of a sticky area where I might not necessarily want my employer to be able to wipe my personal iPhone, right? So in an environment like that, do the end users have access to manage their own device? Are they able to self-enroll devices or unenroll? Do they maintain any control?
Yeah, we as an MDM provider, we offer, of course, the option to enroll devices that are not coming from BP or not like company owned or school owned. In case like that, we have different levels of management. Privacy for us is extremely important, so we really want to make sure that our end users, they really know what kind of access our customers can have on that device, and if it's a personal device, it's not only us, but the MDM protocol itself just protects the end user. So the personal device will have less management than a company-owned device. So first difference, if the device is not enrolled using DEP and only company or school-owned device can be enrolled using the device enrollment program, the profile can be removed by the end user. So if you really feel that the MDM should not be there, the user always have the power to go and remove the MDM profile. On the other side, we have something called supervision. Supervision is a special status on the device that gives MDM and remote management more control, more power. And this is something that during the device enrollment program flow, it's automated. So basically for all school-owned device and company-owned device, the supervision, it's standard. But for bring your own device, it's not. And without the supervision, MDM solutions like us, we have a more limited access to the device. So the end user is really protect, and iOS and macOS is really good to keep this balance between privacy and efficiency on management.
All right, now mobile device management has been a growing space over really the last 10 years. I mean, it's picked up some big steam. So I know you've got some competition out there, not just like Apple's native tools, but other third parties that are out there. So for your product, like what's the feature you're most proud of? What is it that sets you apart from the other competitors?
Yeah, I believe that's less about one specific feature and it's more about the mindset around our product and our offers. So first thing, we really believe that we are managing Apple devices, and we need to remember that Apple was the main responsible for this revolution on customer experience and customer interface. So Apple was the one extending technology to people that was basically not using anything with iOS initially. So having like an MDM that's really easy to use and will allow anyone, even if they're not a technical person, an expert, to manage all device in a short period of time, it's important for us without losing power. So we are always trying to find and to create something that's really easy to use, really intuitive, and on the other side, extremely powerful, covering everything that's possible. Specialization is a big thing for us. I really don't believe the one-size-fits-all strategy. I believe that the way a school is managing a device and the reason why the school is managing the device is really, really different to the reason that a hospital is managing a device or a hotel is managing a device. So we cannot force them to use the same solution. The experience will not be nice. And we try to reflect that on our offers. So we have one solution only for education, and we have one solution only for enterprise. Both solutions are really independent, so they can move on the best direction for them. And even on the enterprise version, we are introducing the concept of flavors. So flavors are subversions of the same product designed only for one vertical. So with Mosyle Business, our enterprise solution, we are able to custom that solution for a specific market like healthcare or higher ed. So specialization for me is really important. I believe MDM itself as a generic product will be a commodity in some years. And the way to keep helping customers is just going deep on their flows and really trying to understand what that specific customer in that specific market want to achieve with their devices and use MDM features to help them to automate the flow and to simplify the flow. And the final point is about cost. It's not because we are managing premium device, special device like Apple device that we should charge more for that. And we really try to set our price based on our numbers. I really don't care a lot for what the market's charging. And the result for that was just having us in a price point that's extremely different than the rest of the markets. And my goal with that is really to stimulate schools and enterprise to increase their fleet of Apple device and show to the market that you can have a phenomenal experience managing Apple device at a fair price point.
You know, something that just popped into my mind, you think about schools, that student data and healthcare is really what triggered it for me, because patient data, people are really sensitive about that. There's regulatory compliance that we have to meet. And I know MDM helps us to kind of maintain that compliance by requiring things like password policies and so on. But as far as the management platform itself, does that reside on site with the customer's infrastructure, or is this like a cloud software as a service type solution?
That's a great point. So actually, we are there helping schools. We are there managing a device that's used by a student, but we are really not interfering on the educational flow. So I'm not receiving personal and academic data for that student. I really don't know how he's performing. I don't know anything about that, and I really don't need to know. The same happens with like hospital. I don't need their medical information for any reason. My goal is just to making sure that their experience with that device is perfect in both cases. However, we are always super concerned as well with other regulations for privacy. So in terms of education, we are compliant with everything for whatever legislation we have here in the US and internationally. We are compliant. We are GDPR compliant as well. So we make sure that we are adopting all the actions to protect the data in the best way as possible, even knowing that we don't manage sensitive data, we manage the devices. But we still want to make our customers confident that whatever info we have will always be super protected.
Excellent. Well, for our audience members that are thinking about deploying an MDM, or maybe they don't have that solution and they need it and they're looking for it, what advice would you give to somebody that's kind of in the market for that right now?
Yeah, we have customers not using MDM now with a wrong expectation that MDM is super technical and it's not something that they can use, and they would need to hire someone with more technical skills for that. It's not true anymore. We do have a lot of new features on MDM side and on Apple side that helps any person basically to manage their device, starting from small startups with like 10, 15 devices to large corporations. So I would really encourage them to look for a nice solution and start playing with that. I'm pretty sure in a few minutes they'll be able to enroll their first device, send some commands, and understand how MDM can change their routine.
Awesome. Well, if our audience wants to learn more about Mosyle and what you can do for them, where's the best way for them, or the best place for them to go?
For sure. We have two different websites depending on the market. So education can find us at manager.mosyle.com. At our website, they will find all the information about our solution and also find a link to open their own account. We really want to provide that experience so they can test by themselves and check how easy it is. For our enterprise customers, they can find us at business.mosyle.com, and we offer the same experience. They can just go in a few minutes, request their account, and start playing with our solution and see how can we help them.
All right, and if any of you are just listening, that's mosyle.com. All right, well, Alcyr, thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it.
That was a pleasure. Thanks for opening space for us.
And for you listeners out there, we appreciate you tuning in as well. Don't go anywhere, though. We have our wrap-up coming up after this.
Welcome back to Technado, and thanks, guys, for another great interview there, and very informative. And I caught up here on my buzzword bingo, but I still do not have all the way. I know Don's got one square to go, but I don't think that's going to happen here in the close.
No, we might need to reevaluate our terms.
Yeah,
or just change the size of the bingo card.
Yes, make it a little 4x4 or something like that.
A win. I win again.
Yeah, once again in the first article, Justin wins. Hey, we want to let you know about a couple of things before we let you go here. First, if you want to head over to itpro.tv/webinars, we have a few good ones coming up. We have an ITIL 4 Foundation Test Prep webinar, tips for passing the exam. That's coming up on Thursday, May 23rd. 2 p.m. Eastern Time. Also have PowerShell to the People, what IT pros need to know about PowerShell on Thursday, June 6th. And then I know we're talking about doing another of those live hacking webinars, Don, because that was really fun and successful.
Yeah, with the last one, what we did was like all the stages of an attack. What Daniel and I are talking about this time is like just kind of picking one or picking a particular attack.
Yeah, that was like a 10,000-foot overview, so we can kind of dig in deeper on certain elements.
And in that webinar, I always talked about like how I could have defended, but we didn't actually defend. So in our next one, we might go a little more granular, pick one attack, and actually do the full defense. And
see if you can actually stop Daniel this time.
Yeah.
You let him right in.
I'm sure I can.
Gates were wide open.
It
was embarrassing. We'll head over to itpro.tv/webinars. You can see those ones coming up and sign up for those. You can also see the past webinars, like what does hacking look like, watching a live network attack from both sides. You can still go ahead and sign up for those and get the recording, so definitely check those out. Also, if you want to learn more about IT Pro TV, head over to go.itpro.tv/technado. You can get a subscription, a coupon code for your subscription, thank you, for 30% off of your membership. You can also find out about business plans, special pricing there, as well as some team features that are unique for businesses. So head over to go.itpro.tv/technado, and while you're on that go.itpro.tv, hit that buzzword -bingo, and you can play along with us that no one got because no one said big data today. So
there it is.
I did it.
Somebody gets a bingo.
Another mercy bingo for Don.
Yeah, that's all I get. Pity bingo.
Wait a minute. Is that really a pity bingo if he's the only one that got bingo, though? Like
Because I
we're not
gave it to him.
pitying him.
I
He
gave
knew the
him
word I needed.
The word.
Yeah, but I don't know if it's pity or we just can't leave our own show without a bingo.
We can't. Yeah, I can, the show will not end
Until we have bingo.
Till someone says blockchain microservice threat feed.
Wait a minute. Hold on. What'd you say?
Cryptocurrency, Bitcoin.
What? I almost went a line there for you. If
you
I only
almost
said
got it.
Yeah, but you
Threat
guys need a better
assessment.
synergy, and then you'd have.
Oh,
No, you wouldn't, would you?
Synergy as a service. Classic.
What's that thing that companies do to
Did
raise
you guys
money?
hear about Uber's IPO? Boy, they
oh
tanked.
yeah, bingo.
Did it tank really? I
Oh, it's
yeah,
like one of
I've
the
been
worst
traveling, so-
performing IPOs in
Yeah,
recent
that's
U.S. history.
disappointing.
Oops.
Like a 3-star.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm proud of myself. All right. That's going to do it for us this time. Episode number 100. We finished 2 out of 3 mini bottles of Prosecco there. And I'm sure we'll get to the next one and we'll be all hungover.
We
for
could have done all 3 if it
episode
didn't
101.
taste like
yeah.
barf.
Yeah, if you had if you had a sip of yours, we could have made a dent in it. But we'll take the rest back to Brad.
Next time we'll do little bottles of scotch.
There you go. Oh, I like that. We're big bottles of scotch. What the
Hey,
heck?
there we go.
Episode 200. You heard it here first. Big bottles of scotch. We hope you stay with us for those next 100. And thanks for sticking around with us this long. But we'll see you next week on episode 101 right here on Technado.